So, good afternoon, everybody. Today we will be talking about the Unit 3 on Interchange 1, 5th edition. Today we are going to be talking about the preferences and comparisons with adjectives. And the objectives of this lesson is that at the end of this lesson, students will be able to express their preferences and establish comparison between two objects using adjectives. So today we are going to establish comparisons between two objects, and we are going also to establish a preference of one object over the other object. So to do so, it's important that you have the adjectives in your portfolio. I mean, it's important for you to know the adjectives, right? So we are going to start. First of all, before starting this lesson, we need to ask ourselves a question. And that question is, what is a preference? So I will give you like 10 seconds to meditate about that. What is a preference? So you can come up with an idea. I'm giving you like 5 or 10 seconds. So, what is a preference? A preference, first of all, that word is a cognate. If you remember, a cognate is a word that is similar to another word. In this case, preference is a cognate of Spanish because it's similar to the word preferencia in Spanish, right? So, what is a preference? The fact that you like something or someone more than another thing or person. That is a preference. So when somebody is asking about your preference, it's the same as if he is asking about something you like. So with this said, we know that a preference is something that you like more than another thing. So take this as an example. I have juice and I have water. I know that some of you have a preference from one or about one over the other. So some of you prefer the water because it's healthier, and some of you prefer the juice because it's tastier, right? So I prefer water. In my personal preference, I prefer water over juice, right? That's my preference. That is something that I like more than the juice, okay? So that is a preference. For example, water or juice. I prefer water. Nashla, Bogart, or Fefita, two options. Which one do you prefer? I prefer Fefita. It's just an example. Okay? So, then what happens? Which car do you prefer? Which car do you prefer is a formal way to ask a question about preference. If I ask you, which car do you prefer? That means that I'm going to give you two or more options. Remember that in English, when we are asking questions with which, is because we are going to give two or more options to choose from. So if I ask you, which car do you prefer? In this case, I'm giving you the first option, a Ferrari, and I'm giving you the second option, a Nissan, right? So, which car do you prefer? Some of you prefer the Ferrari over the Nissan, but some others that they like or old cars or something like that, they prefer the Nissan over the Ferrari. So the way to answer the questions with which do you prefer is like this. I prefer the Ferrari or I prefer the Nissan, because the question is which car do you prefer? So the way to answer that question is with the subject I, because I'm asking that to you, and then prefer, the verb prefer. I prefer, and then the object that you prefer. I prefer the Ferrari or I prefer the Nissan. But we have another way. We have another way to ask about preference. And what is that other way to ask about preference? Which one do you like more? If I ask you, which one do you prefer and which one do you like more? they are the same. Okay, they are the same. if if I ask you in that way, you just have, if I ask you which one do you like more, you just have to answer the question in a way taking, well, let me explain you. Let me explain. For example, I have this. Which one do you like more? The Avengers movie or the Justice League movie? These are two famous movies that we have right now. Well, to be honest, the Justice League movie didn't have enough good scores compared to the Avengers movie, but for me, it was a good movie, right? So, which one do you like more? In this case, how can I answer that question? Can I answer I prefer the Avengers movie or I prefer the Justice League movie? Is correct if I answer a question with which one do you like more with I prefer? It's not incorrect. You can do it. But grammatically correct would be if I answer the question in this way. I like the Avengers more or I like the Justice League more. As you can see here, in the answer, I'm using the same verb and the same adjective in the and the same adjectives to answer the question. The question was, which one do you like more? Like, you know that like, okay, is a verb. A more, right? Is a comparative, right? Of much. So, which one do you like more? I like the Avengers more, or I like the Justice League more. It's not incorrect if you say I prefer the Avengers or I prefer the Justice League, answering that question, but would be more grammatically correct. It would be grammatically correct if you say I like the Avengers more or I like the Justice League more. Now what happens? It doesn't matter your preference. If you have a preference of one object over another object, you have a reason for that preference. For example, you like the Ferrari, but you have a reason, right? You don't like the Nissan, but you have a reason. Why do you like the Ferrari over the Nissan? So that is something that we are going to see right now, because right now we know how to ask about preference. Remember, to ask about preference, we have two ways. The first one is, which one do you prefer, or which one do you like more? Both questions are to ask about preferences. Okay, they mean the same, but they are different in their structure, but they have the same meaning. They have this. If you ask someone that question with a prefer, which one do you prefer, it's the same as if you ask that person which one do you like more. It's the same, no difference, right? The difference is the structure, but the meaning is the same. So now you have your preference, but you need a reason. Why I prefer the Ferrari over the Nissan? I have a reason to do that. I have a reason of that preference. So what happens? In order to explain this, to explain the reason, to explain why I like one object over the other, we make we make comparisons between the two objects. And to make these comparisons, we need the adjectives. Okay? To explain why we like an object over the other object, we need to make the comparisons between these two objects. And to do that comparison, we need something essential, something very essential. And what that is, we need the adjectives. As you can remember, the adjectives are like characteristics, attributes that a person, an object, a thing has. Okay? For example, My cell phone is amazing. I am talking about my cell phone. And what is the adjective? What is the characteristic of my cell phone? It's amazing. My wife is beautiful. What is the attribute? What is the characteristic of my wife? She is beautiful, right? So my computer is fast. You see, what is the adjective there? Fast. So that is the first thing that we need. We need an adjective, right? So to make comparisons with adjective, if we want to make comparisons with adjective of two objects, because if you're making a comparison, you have to take two or more objects. But in this case, we are going to talk about two objects. Okay? To make a comparison with adjective of two objects, we need two fundamental things. So, what do we need? We need an adjective, of course, and we need the preposition than. The preposition than, yes, the preposition than is mandatory when making comparisons between two or more objects. It's completely mandatory. It's not optional, okay? So we need the adjective and we need the preposition than. So, for example, in my preference between the Nissan and the Ferrari, I prefer the Ferrari. But why of my preference? Why do I prefer the Ferrari? Oh, because it's faster than the Nissan. If you pay attention in that reason, it's faster than the Nissan. That's why I prefer the Ferrari over the Nissan. It's faster than the Nissan. So what happens? Here we are using the adjective fast here, right? But what happens? At the ending of the adjective, we have two add letters. Those letters are E and R. And why do we have E and R there? Because when you are making comparisons between two objects with adjectives, it's important to place the adjective in the comparative form. The adjective, they have a simple form, this one, right? Fast, beautiful, a good, bad, and they have a comparative form, right? And with to make the comparative form, we need to add at the end of the adjective er, r, or ier, depending on the ending of the adjective and on the structure of the adjective. That is something that I will explain in later, okay? So, another example. I like the Avengers more. Remember the question, which one do you like more? I like the Avengers more. It's nicer than the Justice League. I'm using it in this case because I'm not talking about the Avengers in plural. I'm talking about the Avengers movie. So don't get confused like teacher, you commit a mistake in the plural and singular. No, I'm talking about the Avengers movie. The Avengers movie is just one movie. Okay? So I like the Avengers movie more. It's nicer than Justice League. Here I'm using the adjective nice, right? But what happens? Nice at the end has R. And I will be explaining that in a moment, right? And then after the adjective, I have than. Remember that I told you that the preposition than is essential, is mandatory when we are making comparisons between two objects. And we place than after the comparative form of the adjective. Okay? So it's nicer than Justice League. That is why I like the Avengers more because it's nicer than Justice League, right? So what happens? We have these two adjectives. We have fast and we have nice. But they have at the end, fast at the end has added E and R. And nice has R. added at the end. What does that mean? Well, let's see. These are called regular adjectives. Regular adjectives. So that means that we also have irregular adjectives. So yes, we have irregular adjectives. So these are called regular adjectives because their endings are with R, ER, or IER. Of course, these endings depends. Sorry, I committed a mistake there without s. Depend on the structure of the adjectives. For adjective of two syllables, of one or two syllables, for example, we tend to use r, er, or ier endings. Of course, this is also followed by the ending of the adjective if they end in CVC or they have a consonant before Y or vowel before Y, etc. So what that means? You remember that for the rules of plural and singular, depending on the ending of the adjective. If the adjective ends in a vowel before y, consonant before y, you have a specific structures to place them, to place the ending. So it's the same here. We have r, er, or I, er. But depending on the ending of the adjective, it's like we are going to place these endings. Okay, that is something that I won't explain today, but I will be explaining later. Okay, so for adjective, because these are the endings r, er, or ier are only for adjective of one or two syllables. But what about the adjectives of three syllables or more? What about them? What happens with them? So the comparative form of those adjectives is created by putting more in front of the adjective and the adjective stays the same. So that means that I will just place more in front of the adjective. We will see some examples so you can have it clear. For example, we have cheap is an adjective of one syllable. Cheap. Remember that the syllables in English are counted. The number of syllables in English are counted by the number of sounds that we have in English. It's not like in Spanish, okay? So cheap, cheaper. That is the comparative form. Big, bigger. That applies in this case if the adjective has only one syllable and ends in CBC. Remember, B is a consonant, I is a vowel, and G is a consonant. We have to double the last consonant and add ER. And then we have pretty, prettier. Sorry, pretty, prettier, right? Then we have busy, busier. You see? Ends in a consonant before Y. And if the adjective ends in a consonant before Y, we need to erase the Y and add IER. Okay? And then I have simple, simple. Okay? And then I have important. Important is an adjective that has three syllables. In, port, tant, three sounds. So that means that I just need to add more before the adjective. And what is the comparative form of important? More important. Simple as that. Expensive. Something expensive. Something expensive is something that you can't afford. It's something that costs a lot of money. So expensive is the comparative form of it is more expensive. As you can see there, expensive is also another syllable, another adjective that has three syllables. Expensive. So according to the rule, I just need to add more, right? I just need to add more in front of the adjective. And the adjective stays the same. You see? Simple as that. These are regular adjectives, not irregular. But so, what about the irregular adjectives? Because we talk about the regular ones, but what about the irregular adjectives? So, for the irregular adjective, as their name refers, irregular adjectives are adjectives with completely irregular forms. We're making comparisons. Their structure change completely. The structure of those adjectives change completely. Okay? So, in this case, for example, I have good. Good is an irregular adjective because the comparative form of good is better. The comparative form of bad is worse. The comparative form of little is less. The comparative form of much is more. The comparative form of far is farther. The comparative form of old is elder. But we old has two comparative forms depending of what are you talking about. For example, we use this comparative form of old, elder, when we are talking about people. Okay, when we are talking about people, when we are talking about let's say animals. But if we are talking about objects, the comparative form of old is regular. The comparative form of old when talking about objects is older, but for people is elder. Okay, so they are irregular adjective because their structure changes completely. Okay, completely. Their structure, they don't have a specific ending. They don't have a rule. Remember that, like the irregular verbs and like the irregular in the plural and the singular, the irregular plural and singular. Sorry, the regular plural. They don't have a specific ending. Okay, when a word, when a verb is irregular, when an adjective is irregular, they don't have a specific ending, they don't have a fixed ending, and they don't have rules. So what do we have to do to know when something is irregular? What do we have to do to know the irregular way of an adjective? We need to learn the irregular ways. We need to study them. There is not a specific rule. For the regular ones, we have specific rules. So imagine that you are taking an exam, right? Um, you have the adjective cheap. In the exam, it says, please make the comparative form for cheap. So in that way, you just need to remember the rule because cheap is regular. Okay, cheap is regular, so I just need to remember the rule. Cheap has only one syllable. So and cheap so ends in a consonant. So and before the consonant I have a. So let me see. I just have to add er. That is the rule. So let me add er. Right. So but when you have a irregular adjective and the irregular adjective they don't have so they don't have a specific rule, they don't have a specific ending. How do you know the comparative form of that irregular adjective? How do you know that? Is there a rule to know it? No. In that way you must memorize them, you must learn them. Okay, is different from the regular adjectives. Okay, so that is something very important. So those are irregular adjectives. Now, so now that we know what are regular and irregular adjectives, let's go back let's go back to these questions, right? For example, which province do you prefer, Santo Domingo or San Juan? Take your time. I will give you 10 seconds to talk about your preference, to think about your preference, and to come up with an answer. Ask yourself that question and answer to yourself that question. So, which province do you prefer, Santo Domingo or San Juan? I prefer San Juan. There is a reason for that, right? Yes, there is a reason. So, it's cleaner than Santo Domingo. Cleaner. San Juan is cleaner than Santo Domingo. As you can see there, I'm using the adjective clean, right? I'm using the adjective clean. And after the comparative form of the adjective, I'm using than because always than is a must. Than is completely essential. So I have another question. Which one do you like more? Ice cream or frozen yogurt? Which one do I like more? Let me see. I like ice cream more. That's my preference, okay? I like ice cream more. It's tastier than frozen yogurt. Tastier is similar to more delicious, okay? Similar to more delicious. So I like ice cream more. Why I'm using I like ice cream more? Because I'm asking which one do you like here more? So I like ice cream more. What is the reason? Why? Simple. It's tastier than frozen yogurt. In this case, you see that the ending of a, that is the adjective tasty, right? The adjective tasty. Tasty ends in Y, and before Y, what do we have? We have a consonant, the consonant T. So in that case, we need to erase the Y and add IER. So it's tastier than frozen yogurt. That is my preference, right? Let's see the last question. Which pizza do you prefer? Pineapple pizza or pepperoni pizza? So I'm asking about your preference. I prefer pepperoni pizza. Why? It's more delicious than pineapple pizza. Why in this case I'm using more? Because delicious, how many sounds does delicious have? Let's see. Delicious. Three sounds. Is has three syllables. So according to the rule, for the adjective with more than three syllables, so we have to we have to add more before the adjective. In this case, it's more delicious. So is delicious irregular verb, a regular adjective, sorry? No, it's regular adjective. Okay? So it's more delicious. Remember, those adjectives where you have to add more in front of them, they are all regular. They are not irregular. Irregular are the adjectives that change completely. The way the ending, the adjective itself changes completely. Okay? That is an irregular adjective. But the regular ones, they have just words added to the end or at the end, sorry, or in this case, they have the word more added before the adjective itself. Okay? So I prefer pepperoni pizza. It's more delicious than pineapple pizza. So you see, this is how I can make comparisons between adjectives, between objects. You need two objects or more than two, but in this case, we are working only with two. You need two objects, right? Imagine this. Huawei and iPhone. And you need an adjective. Let's see. Why do I prefer Huawei over iPhone? Huawei is cheaper. Well, depends the Huawei phone. So for in my preference, why is that my preference? Because it's cheaper for me, right? So I prefer Huawei. It's cheaper than iPhone. Okay, Huawei is cheaper than iPhone. Remember that I'm using the pronoun it instead of the noun because it's better and it's faster, right? But I can say I prefer, in this case, I prefer San Juan. San Juan is cleaner than Santo Domingo, but I don't want to say San Juan again. So in that case, I use a pronoun instead of the noun, okay? So it's cleaner than Santo Domingo. In my case, in my example, I prefer Huawei. It's cheaper than iPhone. I'm using the comparative form of cheap. What is the comparative form of cheap? Cheaper. And after the comparative form is always mandatory, is a must to use than, than, than. It's cheaper than iPhone. Which one do you like more, ice cream or frozen yogurt? I like ice cream more. Why? My friend, ice cream is tastier than frozen yogurt. So as you can see, guys, this is how we make comparisons. This is how we express our preference and we explain why is our preference. And we make the comparisons between the two objects. Okay, this is something very easy, something that uh, to know it, of course, to know this lesson, you need to know the adjectives. You need to master the adjective. So to do so, guys, at the end of this video, you will check your Google Classroom group, and I will give you some. I will put this slideshow here so you can have it there, and also I will give you some exercises. So you have to go there and you have to check the exercises that will be useful for you to practice with. Okay, so thank you for watching. As always, as at the end of the class, I always say, if you don't love yourself, how the hell would you love somebody else? Can I hit an amen? Good luck. Don't fuck it up. See you then, guys.